Well, greetings, students. Let's continue thinking about the philosophy of Taoism together. Now, remember I said that following ancient Chinese philosophy, it seems to me that all metaphysics is essentially practical. All metaphysics leads directly into an ethics. And the Daodejing, along with most ancient Chinese thought, is formulated as an art of ruling. The art of the Tao is an art of rulership, and is ostensibly addressed to the ruler of the kingdom. And yet it is also about the sage. The text is full of sages, wise people who engage in self-mastery and teach the mastery of their own self. Okay? So the sage is the one who rules himself or herself completely. And anyone who listens then can learn the way. And so there's an ethic of the way that essentially evolves a metaphysics. An ethic that flows out of this so-called mystical philosophy that's very practical indeed, as I hope to show you. For example, Lao Tzu tells us that when faced with hatred, we should respond with Da. We should respond with integrity. That when attacked, we should be restrained and always respond to an attacker with calmness. In fact, consider number 63 with me. Lao Tzu writes in chapter 63, act without acting, serve without serving, taste without tasting, big, little, many, few, repay hatred with Da, repay hatred with character and integrity. Now, maybe such device seems wildly unrealistic. Seems to make an almost impossible ethical demand on social reflexes conditioned from birth for survival and success in struggle and strife in society. And yet these thinkers weren't trying to be unreal about what they were saying. Remember, they lived in a time of profound social upheaval, full of war and terror that we've talked about before, during the so-called Warring States period, where there were 7 competing states locked in ceaseless and savage warfare. And innovations such as horseback riding, iron weapons, and the crossbow made everything that much more hellish. And atrocities were committed. I mentioned before how sometimes enemy warriors would be boiled alive and turned into soup, or you'd have to turn in a head from the battlefield to get your pay. We see echoes of this in the text. Look at number 30 with me, for example. Use Tao to help rule people. This world has no need for weapons, which soon turn on themselves. Where armies camp, nettles grow. After each war, years of famine. These people understood in great detail, like only those who've lived through years of savage warfare can, what war really means. So I think the paradox and dilemma that the demands they're making in their ethics would have been more real to them than to us. And so the text points to a need to erase our social reflexes that we've been conditioned into from birth. But just because it makes sense to erase them, say because I've been convinced by an argument or by listening to someone talk that I should do it, makes it no easier. It's not easy to respond with calm or integrity or compassion to an attack upon yourself or on your family. It's not made any easier just because you think it's the ethically or even the logically correct thing to do. So the idea is I must learn to dissolve reflex and response alike in the memory of a stronger experience. When I remember my apprehension of the reality and quietness and nothingness that's so overwhelming that it totally changes how I look at things and becomes stronger in me than the effect of the violence and the terror and the things that triggers in me and makes me want to do. So that in comparison, anger seems unreal. Hatred seems unreal in the memory of that great calm. Okay? And irrelevant in the experience of what that word Tao points to. Remember, this is an experiential metaphysics, a practical metaphysics, as I like to think of it. right? Its ethics is the most real thing about it. It's not an ideology, it's not a religion, it's not a theory about reality. It's a reworking of how you live in the world based upon how you actually experience it and think about it. And the heart of all this, for me, is found in chapter 16. We're going to take a look at chapter 16 in a second, but I think what it's describing is a total reorientation of attitude and experience so that you see the world in an entirely different way. But before we look at 16, take a look at something else with me, because it's important to have a grasp on what this ethic means, how it's meant to be lived out. And in Taoism, there's what is called the three jewels, or the three treasures of how you should act, sort of three ethical precepts that govern all of life, and are thought to be a kind of secret to life, which is found not in how you think, but how you live, or rather how you think involves how you live, and how you live involves how you think. So look with me at chapter 67. I have it up here for you. I've modified the translation just a little bit. I have three jewels to maintain and conserve. The first is compassion. The second is simplicity. The third is not presuming to be first under heaven. Compassion leads to courage. Simplicity allows generosity. Not presuming to be first creates a lasting instrument. Nowadays, people reject compassion, but want to be brave. After all, they lived in a time of ceaseless warfare. They reject simplicity, but want to be generous. They reject humility and want to come first. This is death. Compassion. Attack with it and win. Defend with it and stand firm. Heaven aids and protects through compassion. Notice how strong the language is. To reject compassion, simplicity, and a kind of humility, they equate with death, and they equate compassion with life. And these are called the three jewels or treasures of Taoism, the three ethical principles that are meant to guide you in how you live your life so that you can be great. Remember, great means great within and great outside. Great in the sense of having composure and harmony and integration with nature and those around you, and in your inner world as well. So the first one is qi, or compassion, right? That's how I translated it, but it also has within it the sort of notion of tenderness, love, mercy, kindness, gentleness, sometimes benevolence. It's also associated with the idea of the nurturing mother that we've looked at before. The second jewel is jian, which means frugality, simplicity, moderation, restraint, economy, that you're sparing, right? You're sparing in your words, you're sparing in your actions, you show restraint, and you show the simplicity of the uncarved block. And finally, the third treasure is a whole phrase, which means not daring to be first or ahead in the world, being filled with a suitable humility and modesty about who you really are. I think this is very much akin to something the Greeks had in their thought when they talked about having a real self-knowledge about what your limits are, right? Know yourself, which meant know yourself within your limits. Don't think you're more than you are, and don't think you're less than you are, but stay restrained and humble and modest in your place in the world. The Greeks said nothing in excess, and that's just what this means. So that's the ethics, but how on earth do you live it? Well, you live it through experiencing the world in a certain way, through certain meditational practices and attitudes and habits of mind that will totally change how you live and look at the world, right? And number 16 is all about that. Let's read through the whole thing first, and then I want to talk about parts of it, one after another. Attain complete emptiness. Hold fast to stillness. The 10,000 things stir about. I only watch for their going back. Things grow and grow, but each goes back to its root. Going back to the root is stillness. This means returning to what is. Returning to what is means going back to the ordinary. Understanding the ordinary, enlightenment. Not understanding the ordinary, blindness creates evil. Understanding the ordinary, mind opens. Mind opening leads to compassion, compassion to nobility, nobility to heavenliness, heavenliness to Tao. Tao endures. Your body dies. There is no danger. Now, this chapter is describing a way you experience the world through meditation. You attain complete emptiness, and you hold fast to stillness. It says the 10,000 things. That just means everything around you. The whole universe is stirring around. I only watch for their going back. Things are growing and growing, but each goes back to its root. It's not talking about the world around you, as it were, going somewhere, but you're changing. Your mind is changing, and a different worldscape, a different view of the world is opening up before you, where you begin to sense this great stillness in what is, when you return to what is. The great bustling world around you has at its heart a kind of stillness that you can only perceive when you grow still within yourself. Right? Think of moments when you're in nature, because that's what they're thinking of too. Moments when you're in nature and you grow very still inside, and all of a sudden, the sound of the birds, the blue of the sky, the green of the trees, the water in the brooks, the wind blowing through the leaves, all combines into a kind of great stillness that means returning to what is. And there's a calm inside and a calm without, right? Everything seems to stir about, but I look for that point in my mind when I realize that I can feel them going back to their root, and I can experience them as they really are. When I experience Tao, how things go with each other, and nobody needs to force anything, and nobody needs to make rules for trees to grow like trees grow, and nobody needs to make rules for the wind to blow like it blows, or the water to flow, and nobody has to enforce upon water that it'll quench my thirst, and nobody has to make the sunshine keep me warm, and nobody has to make food nourishing to me, because my body just does that in its own still, quiet, marvelous way, the great natural way. The phrase is to return to what is, to return to the experience of being, what it means to be. In this kind of metaphysics, you don't just think about being, right? But you achieve an apprehension of it. And this is common in many philosophies in the ancient West and the ancient East. Right? Plato's vision of the good, right, that you read about in the Republic and his other dialogues, have the same idea, right? That you go outside the cave of bodily and social life, to experience being and goodness. Or like Spinoza's apprehension of what he calls God or nature. You find the same basic idea of unity in one form or another in any real philosophy, which is always aimed at a certain way of experiencing and apprehending the world so that it results in a certain way of living. So Plato, say, or Lao Tzu, move out from custom into self-knowledge, and out of that moment of apprehension, traces fall that I've called speculation, right? They move out of that gap between what society has told them is real and what they're experiencing, and they leave us words that are like fingers pointing at the moon, okay? And then jokers called academics might sit around and reflect about those speculations, right? You'll meet them often in the academic world, and they're somehow missing the forest for the trees. They only seem to recognize their own reflection, or they only seem to look at the finger that's pointing at the moon and never understand that the whole point of the finger is to get you to look at the moon. One philosopher I fell in love with was called Søren Kierkegaard. He was a Danish philosopher in the 19th century who has a funny little book called, or funny big book, called The Concluding Unscientific Postscript. But in another place, we found in his papers after he died a funny little fragment of a story about a grad student in philosophy who's going to class, and he hears about Descartes. And Descartes says, well, let's doubt everything, right? And so he starts trying to do what Descartes says. He starts trying to doubt everything, and then he can't get back. He went too far, and he's beginning to doubt everything, and he doesn't know what to do. And he goes to his professors for help. Please, I've listened to what you said, and I've listened to what Descartes says, and I'm beginning to doubt everything, and I don't know how to believe in anything again. And they can't help him at all, because it turned out these academic philosophers never took Descartes seriously. It was just a way to make a living, playing with intellectual puzzles. And they can't even comprehend what this poor grad student is trying to tell them. What if it's really true? You ask, right? You ask your teachers, you ask your parents, you ask your authorities, whoever they are. What if there's an absolute reality? What if there is wisdom and I can find it? What then? And so Lao Tzu says in chapter 41, the lesser scholar hearing the Tao has a good laugh. Without that laughter, it wouldn't be Tao. Matter of fact, let's look at the whole passage. Number 41. Right? In number 41, let me get there for you. It says, the great scholar hearing the Tao tries to practice it. The middling scholar hearing the Tao sometimes has it, sometimes not. The lesser scholar hearing the Tao has a good laugh. Without that laughter, it wouldn't be Tao. Therefore, he adds, the bright road seems dark. Okay? You hear all these amazing things, and you might say, well, bullshit, and you just laugh. Such things aren't possible. Well, without that scorn, without that laughter, it wouldn't be Tao. Right? Say wisdom, and ignorance is born. Say appreciation, and disfavor is born. That's just the way it works. The bright road does seem dark. So chapter 16 continues chronicling this sort of experience of metaphysical realities that change how you live. Returning to what is means going back to the ordinary. The ordinary. Drinking water, eating food, walking outside in the sunshine and the wind, touching somebody, hugging somebody, talking with somebody. All these marvelous things that seem so ordinary, but really aren't. Returning to what is means going back to the ordinary, understanding the ordinary, enlightenment. You know, when Buddhism came to China, it met up with Taoists, and Buddhism plus Taoists equals what's called Chan, or Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is like the Buddha plus Lao Tzu together. Right? And when those dudes met up, the Buddhists and the Taoists, they understood each other right away. Right? In Zen Buddhism, you have, for example, a famous story. It's like a guy goes to the monastery and he wants to get enlightened. And he stays outside and knocks on the gate, and they don't let him in. And he stays, and he knocks, and he's there 3 days. And finally they say, we'd better let this guy in. He's acting like he really wants to get enlightened. And he goes in, and he goes up to the master, and the master says, what are you here for? And he says, I'm here to get enlightened and discover the truth about absolute reality. And the master says, well then, you'd better go eat your breakfast. And after that, you'd better wash your bowl. And it says, and at that moment, the monk became enlightened. And there's just hundreds of stories like that about how everyday life is astonishing, right? One of my favorite Zen masters, Thich Nhat Hanh, once said, the real miracle is not to walk on water. It's just to walk on earth. Walking on earth is miracle enough. Lao Tzu says, not understanding the ordinary, blindness creates evil. But understanding the ordinary, the mind opens. I mean, the Taoists even call it sometimes the great ordinary. I just love that. The great ordinary. And what is ordinary, really? I mean, what is ordinary and what is not? Maybe everything is upside down. This is sometimes called the theory of reversal. What if what I was taught to think was important was unimportant? And what if what I was taught to think was unimportant is important? You might remember an earlier chapter we looked at where he talked about how everybody seems to understand exactly what they're supposed to do. They know what all the rules and names mean, but I seem kind of stupid and confused compared to them, right? But what if the idea is they're the ones that are really stupid and confused, and I just look stupid and confused to them because they don't understand, right? Is it ordinary to live as if there was nothing more than the social goals that society gives us, career and money, respect from your peers, and power, right? The ability to be noticed, to become famous, right? That might be something really strange and exotic in terms of how things really are. A sort of an extraordinary appearance behind which the great ordinary reality, which really matters, rolls on. Okay? And all of a sudden, penetrating to the ordinary, eating your breakfast and washing your bowl or listening to the birds sing, the real, everything seems turned upside down. What seemed normal was really abnormal, and the abnormal becomes the normal. Look at number 22 with me, because that's what it's talking about. It's talking about an experience where everything flips all of a sudden because your whole mental and ethical orientation has changed. Yeah, 22. Crippled becomes whole. Crooked becomes straight. Hollow becomes full. Worn becomes new. Little becomes more. Much becomes delusion. Much that you thought was true just becomes delusion. He says, the old saying, crippled becomes whole, is not empty words. It becomes whole. It returns. And this experience that they're talking about of the Tao, that they're pointing at, that they're wishing we would try to experience for ourselves. And so the text says, mind opening leads to compassion, right? The mind and compassion seem to go together. Reminds me of the Upanishads. They had the same thought, remember, that thinking and compassion are at some level identical, right, in a transrational sense. Compassion leads to nobility, nobility to heavenliness, heavenliness to Tao. Tao endures, your body dies, there is no danger. Well, there's some mysterious words, but I think they point to the idea of an experience so powerful that you don't even fear death, but you just look at it as part of life. So what is abnormal and what is normal? Is it normal to go to work day after day, pay your bills, go to church, vote, consume, get drunk now and then or high, have wild sex now and then, right? Live and die and be buried after a proper service in a funeral home, according to proper tradition? How really very exotic, the Taoists say. How really very strange and twisted and weird and kind of wonderful, too. In a way, you like look at something and go, wow, look at that. I can't believe they're doing that to themselves, right? Compared to the great ordinary reality of the Tao. Look at a section from Zhuangzi with me, who we'll get to next week, right? He's talking about three friends. And so the passage starts out, there were three friends discussing life. That's kind of cool. Sound like they're philosophers, right? Just sitting around discussing life, trying to figure out what's real, right? Like we're doing in our class. Maybe we're friends too somehow, philosophical friends. One said, can men live together and know nothing of it? What do I know? Now that's a philosopher, they say. Can we be living together and not really know what it means? Can we work together and produce nothing? Can they fly around in space and forget to exist, world without end? Who knows? But they're nice questions to ask. The three friends looked at each other and burst out laughing. They had no explanation. They just sort of knew what they didn't know, and they were better friends than before. Then, sadly, one friend died, and Confucius heard about that and sent one of his students to help the other two chant his funeral liturgy, to help him, do his burial service in the proper way, with the proper hymns and chants and songs like you're supposed to when somebody dies. And when that student of Confucius got there, he found that one friend had composed a song while the other played a lute, and they sang to each other, "Hey, Sung Hoo, where'd you go? Hey, Sung Hoo, where'd you go? You have gone where you really were, and we are here, damn it! We are here." Well, that student of Confucius, very proper man who taught everybody to follow the rules, very shocked, hearing all this, "Hey, Sung Ho, where'd you go? Damn it, while we're still here," instead of the proper songs and everything. The disciple of Confucius burst in on them and exclaimed, "May I inquire where you found this in the rules for funeral services? This frivolous caroling in the presence of the departed?" And the two friends looked at each other and laughed. "Poor fellow," they said. "He doesn't know the new liturgy." Remember, the body dies. There is no danger. I've often thought, after I die, right, one of these days, who knows when, if they ever hold one of those memorial services to me like I've gone to for other professors, where the students get up to speak and they say all sort of solemn things about me, about how much I meant to them and how great a teacher I was and blah, 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 and my colleagues get up and say nice things too. I would like you to plan something for me. I tell this to my students every year when I teach this, and I hope enough of you are there that somehow, right in the middle of the service, all of a sudden you'll have it planned out. At a crucial moment, there'll be a moment of silence, and you'll just start chanting, sort of back and forth. "Hey, Dr. G, where'd you go? Hey, Dr. G, where'd you go? You have gone where you really were, and we are here, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. We are here, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it." And then you can sort of get it going. "Hey, Dr. G, where'd you go? Hey, Dr. G, where'd you go? We are here, damn it, while you are where you are." Something like that, with people who can sing better. Y'all get it going. It's the new liturgy. It's the new liturgy. Okay. Well, I have one more lecture on Lao Tzu for you, and then a couple on Zhuangzi. So I look forward to talking to you next time, and I just want to thank you for your kind attention.